Hey guys, so this is our last video. Kind of excited about that, even though they actually weren't too bad. They weren't as bad as I thought they were going to be. But glad that we're almost done with this semester. Next semester I'll be taking my comps and luckily graduating. Um, so for these two chapters, I really enjoyed these two chapters because I think it's things that interest me greatly, especially the issues with women in law and how far we have come just as a gender. So I just thought that one was super, super interesting. One thing in particular on page 351, or I'm sorry, 341, where it's talking about the Me Too movement, and it's talking about how women in legal professions are far from being immune from sexual and gender harassment. And I have to also expand on that and say, not just legal, but also law enforcement. Women in law enforcement, I think it's a little better now than it used to be. When I started in law enforcement, I started in 2001. So that was 23 years ago when I started. It was hard being female and being an officer at that time. Not really because of the males that I was being hired with, but it was the males that were there prior. You had the old school officers who believed women shouldn't be in law enforcement, plain and simple. If you were in law enforcement, you were normally you would do like the domestic stuff and things like that. They kind of seen that as the women's place in law enforcement. They didn't A lot of times, I mean, I've literally been told that I had no reason to be in law enforcement, that I shouldn't be there. So it happened. It happened then. I think it still happens now. I think the sexual harassment is it happens a lot in law enforcement with females, and I think a lot of times females let that go because they want to feel accepted into this career path, even though, that's what they want to do. You don't want to be sexually harassed. But at the same point in time, I think a lot of them kind of let that slide and they joke it off and whatever, just because they still want to continue to do this job. And sometimes you kind of feel like you don't have much of a choice. And that's sad, but it is the truth and it still happens today. Um, Another thing I thought was really interesting in the chapter that was brought up is the difference in how women are treated in the United States versus other countries in the world. So, this was one thing that I actually found when I lived in Germany for about a year and a half with my husband. Um, he was working on an air base there. He was a principal over a high school at an air base, and we lived off base because we were not military, technically military. He's ex-military, but he was not in the military, so we lived off base. So we had a lot of interaction with um, the German people that lived there in our little town. So one thing that I found very interesting was I got to talking to one of my neighbors, and she was telling me about when after she had her daughter, she was able to take an entire year off from work. Um, and she didn't have to use her leave to do this. It was automatically a thing. When you have your child, you get a year off work. You don't make 100% of your salary, but you make 90% of your salary. And even if you decided to wait and go back another year later, you could do that and you still made your salary, but it was a little bit less. It was a percentage less. I think maybe it was around 80% that you made that second year. Um, you also, after your child is born, you are given a lump sum of money by the government to help take care of, the things that come up when you have a baby. They're expensive. And then also childcare. Childcare is provided. You don't have to pay out the wazoo for childcare like we do here. I know when my daughter was born, we were paying right at around $600 a month just for childcare. She thought that was just absolutely absurd. And, that was one thing when we were there. I wanted to get her into a German kindergarten there, that's what they call their daycare. But I couldn't get them in because all their spots are reserved for children in that town. So I couldn't get her in those. She ended up having to go to a daycare on base. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting in the fact of how different women are treated in the US versus other countries. You know, we can't help it that we are the ones who bear the children. Trust me. I think most of us would be okay if the men could do that. But that's just not the way it works. And I feel like that we are punished for that because I know when I had my daughter, I had to use my personal sick leave. I had to use some vacation leave um, to not go to work, and I couldn't at the time. I was in law enforcement, and my doctor would not release me to go back to work until I think it was 6 weeks after I had her. So it's not like I had a choice of whether I could work or not. I was not medically released. So that I thought that was interesting. Moving on, to the next chapter, talking about the other minorities. I thought that one was also interesting. Personally, I found the part about the American Indians a little more interesting than the other areas, just because I think we really, really, really done them wrong. I mean, really bad. Not saying that we didn't do the other ones bad, but I always just found that interesting and to get to learn more about um, what went on with that and how we were able to give them some of their rights, even though still don't think that we're even close to making things right with the American Indians. So that was it. My synopsis is a little bit longer this week because it did cover two chapters, but I tried to keep it as short as I could. So I think that's all I've got. Um, Thanks, guys. It's been a great class and hope everyone does great on their finals. See ya.